The sun hung like a copper penny in the New Mexico sky, baking the earth to dust and painting long shadows across the weathered boards of Eagle Pass. Samantha Blackwell rode into town on a dappled mare, her hat pulled low against the glare, her face unreadable in the harsh light. Locals stepped aside as she dismounted, eyes lingering on the twin colts strapped to her hips and the silver star pinned to her worn leather vest. Not a lawman's badge, but the mark of a licensed bounty hunter, a hunter of men. The Dancing Coyote Saloon fell silent as she pushed through the batwing doors, conversations dying like flames doused in sand. Sam ignored the stares, making straight for the bar where a thin man in expensive Eastern suit stood out like a cardinal among crows. Henry Whittaker. She'd recognize him from the description in his letter. Banker, businessman, and a man desperate enough to hire someone like her. Mr. Whittaker, she said, voice low and steady. The banker turned, relief washing over his pinched features. Miss Blackwell, you're earlier than expected. Samantha Blackwell rides when she's paid to ride, she replied. Accepting the whiskey, he signaled the bartender to pour. And you've paid handsomely. Whittaker glanced around nervously, then gestured toward corner table. Perhaps somewhere more private to discuss the details. Sam followed, boots echoing on the wooden floor as conversation gradually resumed around them. She sat with her back to the wall, an old habit, from years of hunting men who'd sooner put a bullet in her spine than face justice. You mentioned a fugitive in your letter, she said without preamble. Once they were seated, your brother, if I recall correctly. Whittaker's mouth tightened. Thomas, yes, my younger brother. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded poster, spreading it flat on the table between them. Wanted for the robbery of my bank 3 weeks ago. $5,000 taken. Sam studied the image on the poster. A man with Whittaker's same sharp nose and high forehead, but with something gentler in the eyes. Something that didn't quite match the bold, wanted stamped above his likeness. Family business is messy, she observed, taking a slow sip of whiskey. Most men wouldn't advertise their blood's crimes. Most men aren't responsible for the security of an entire town's savings, Whittaker countered. The money Thomas took wasn't just mine. It belonged to families, people who trusted our bank. And the local law can't find him? Sheriff Hayes has his hands full with a gang working the southern trails. He's put out the posters, Whittaker shrugged. Thomas knows this territory, grew up in it, same as me. He could hide for years in those canyons. Sam folded the poster and tucked it into her vest pocket. You're offering $1,000 for his capture. Alive, your letter specified. He's still my brother, Whittaker said, a flicker of something, regret, guilt crossing his face. I want him brought to justice, not to the undertaker. Justice and mercy rarely ride the same trail. Nevertheless, those are my terms. $1,000 for Thomas, delivered alive to Eagle Pass within 2 weeks. Before the circuit judge arrives, he slid a small leather pouch across the table. $200 is advance. The rest when you bring him in. Sam pocketed the pouch without counting it. I'll need more information. Last known whereabouts, associates, habits, the kind of details only family would know. For the next hour, Whittaker painted a portrait of Thomas, 32 years old, educated back east, but always restless, more comfortable with horses and open sky than with ledgers and bank vaults. A dreamer, Whittaker called him, with a hint of disdain. A man with grand plans that never quite materialized. He was last seen heading northwest, toward Red Canyon country, Whittaker concluded. There's an old prospector there, Benjamin Holt, who's always had a soft spot for Thomas. Might be giving him shelter. I'll find him, Sam said, rising. 2 weeks is more time than I need. Miss Blackwell, Whittaker called as she turned to leave. There's one more thing you should know. Thomas is persuasive, convincing. He'll spin tales about being framed, about me setting him up. Don't believe him. We have 3 witnesses who saw him leaving the bank that night, saddlebags heavy with cash. Sam's expression gave nothing away. I don't get paid to believe, Mr. Whittaker, only to bring them in. Outside, the heat hit her like a physical blow, after the saloon's relative cool. Sam mounted her mare with practiced ease, her mind already mapping the journey to Red Canyon. 2 days hard ride if the weather held. She'd need supplies, ammunition, food, water for the desert crossing. As she trotted toward the general store, a voice called from the shadows, between buildings. Miss Blackwell. A word? Sam's hand moved instinctively to her holster as she reined in, scanning the alley. A man stepped forward, silver-haired, with a tin star pinned to a faded vest. Sheriff Hayes, she presumed. Whittaker hire you to find his brother, the lawman asked without preamble. That's my business. Sam replied evenly. Becomes my business when it's in my jurisdiction. Hayes squinted up at her. Known the Whittaker boys most of their lives. Something about this whole affair doesn't sit right. Not my concern. I was hired to bring in a fugitive, not solve a mystery. Hayes sighed, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. Just, if you find Thomas, listen to what he has to say before you drag him back. That's all I'm asking. Before Sam could question him further, a commotion down the street drew the sheriff's attention. With a nod that might have been in either warning or farewell, he replaced his hat and hurried away. Sam watched him go, a flicker of unease settling beneath her ribs. In 15 years of bounty hunting, she developed an instinct for complications. This job was already showing signs of being more tangled than Whittaker had let on. Still, $1,000 was $1,000, and Samantha Blackwell had never failed to deliver what she promised. Dawn found her already miles from Eagle Pass, the desert landscape stretching vast and empty in all directions. She rode steadily northwest, conserving her horse's strength for the difficult terrain ahead. By midday, the flat plain had given way to rocky foothills, the first sentinels of Red Canyon country. She made camp that night in the shelter of a limestone outcropping, building a small fire more for company than warmth in the desert night. As stars crowded the velvet sky, Sam pulled the wanted poster from her pocket, studying Thomas Whittaker's face in the flickering light. There was something troubling in the disparity between the man on the poster and the description his brother had given. The image showed clear eyes, an open expression, not the calculating opportunist Henry had described. Of course, appearances could deceive. Sam had hunted baby-faced killers and grandmotherly thieves. Looks meant nothing, yet the sheriff's words echoed in her mind. Something doesn't sit right. She tucked the poster away and rolled into her blanket, one hand on her Colt. Morning would bring answers one way or another. The next day's ride took her deep into canyon country, a maze of redstone carved by wind and water into fantastic shapes. Game trails wound through the labyrinth, but Sam followed a fainter path, one that appeared and disappeared, like a mirage. By late afternoon, she caught sight of smoke rising from a narrow valley ahead. Leaving her horse, tethered in a hidden draw, she approached on foot, moving silently over the rocky ground. The cabin came into view gradually, a simple structure of stone and timber, weathered by years of desert storms. A small corral stood empty beside it, but fresh manure suggested a horse had been there recently. Sam crouched behind a boulder, observing. Smoke curled from the chimney and a lantern glowed in one window despite the daylight. Likely the interior was dim. Someone was home. She moved closer, stepping carefully to avoid loose stones. Through the window, she caught glimpses of movement. A man stirring something over the fire, alone. From what she could tell, Sam drew her right-hand Colt and approached the door. With practiced efficiency, she kicked it open, weapon leveled. Thomas Whittaker. Don't move. The man at the fireplace spun, nearly upsetting the pot he'd been tending. He was younger than his poster suggested, with several days' growth of beard and clothes that had seen hard travel. His eyes widened as they fixed on Sam's gun, then narrowed in resignation. Didn't take Henry long to send someone after me, he said, voice steady despite the circumstances. He slowly raised his hands. I suppose I should be flattered. He hired a woman. They say Samantha Blackwell only takes the high-value contracts. Sam's expression remained neutral. You know who I am. Your reputation precedes you. Thomas nodded toward a shelf where a rifle lay just out of his reach. I'm not armed otherwise. You can check. Sam moved forward cautiously, her gun never wavering as she patted him down with her free hand. Clean, as he claimed. She gestured toward a chair. Sit. Hands where I can see them. Thomas complied, watching her with an unsettling calmness. How much is my brother paying you to bring me in? That's between me and my client. $1,000, Thomas. That's his price for family loyalty these days. Sam ignored the bait, instead scanning the cabin. A bedroll in one corner. Saddlebags by the door. A small table covered with papers. No sign of the stolen money. Where's your horse? Benjamin took him into town for supplies. Thomas nodded toward the pot. Stew's almost ready. If you're hungry, seems a shame to waste it. I'm not here for dinner, Sam replied coldly, though the aroma reminded her she hadn't eaten since dawn. I'm here to bring you back to Eagle Pass to face robbery charges. Thomas sighed. I was framed, set up by my own brother, for a crime I didn't commit. Sam recalled Whittaker's warning about his brother's persuasiveness. 3 witnesses saw you leaving the bank that night. 3 of Henry's employees, I'd wager, paid to testify against me. Thomas gestured toward the table. I have proof. Documents showing Henry's been embezzling from the bank for months, using customer deposits to cover gambling debts. I confronted him about it the day before the robbery. Despite herself, Sam felt a flicker of curiosity. Why would your brother frame you for a crime he committed? Because I threatened to expose him. To go to the bank's board of directors with what I'd found. Thomas's eyes held a mixture of anger and hurt. My own brother chose to destroy me rather than face the consequences of his actions. Sam's expression remains kept. Convenient story. But true. Thomas stood slowly, hands still visible. Look at the papers on the table. Bank records, loan documents with forged signatures, proof of money transferred to Henry's personal accounts in Denver. Sam hesitated, instinct warring with professional detachment. She'd been hired to bring in Thomas Whittaker, not investigate his claims of innocence. Yet the sheriff's warning and something in Thomas's steady gaze gave her pause. Don't move, she ordered, backing toward the table without taking her eyes off him. With her free hand, she shuffled through the papers, scanning figures and signatures that meant little to her. These could be forged, she said. Created to support your story. Why would I bother? I could have simply run farther. Mexico, maybe. Or lost myself in the territories. Thomas shook his head. I stayed because I intend to clear my name. To expose Henry for what he's done. Sam lowered her gun slightly, assessing. In 15 years of hunting fugitives, she'd developed a sense for when someone was lying. Thomas Whittaker's calm certainty didn't feel like deception. But feelings weren't facts, and she had a job to do. It doesn't matter if I believe you, she said finally. I was hired to bring you in. And that's what I'm going to do. And if I'm hanged for a crime I didn't commit. Could you live with that, Miss Blackwell? She could answer. The distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Sam moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight as she peered out. 3 riders approached from the south, not the direction she expected the old prospector to return from. Expecting company, she asked sharply. Thomas joined her at the window, keeping his hands visible. His face paled. It's Wilson and Harris, Henry's security men from the bank. And that's Frank Delaney with them. He runs the saloon in Eagle Pass, covers Henry's gambling debts. Psalm's eyes narrowed as she studied the approaching men. They rode with purpose, rifles visible in saddle holsters. This wasn't a casual visit. Friends of yours? She asked. Hardly. They're the ones who helped Henry frame me. Thomas's voice was tight with urgency. If they find me here, I'll never make it back to Eagle Pass alive. They're not here to arrest me, Miss Blackwell. Sam mentally calculated her options. If Thomas was telling the truth, these men represented a complication she hadn't bargained for. If he was lying, this could be an elaborate setup to escape custody. Yet something about the rider's approach triggered her instincts. They moved with the cautious precision of men on a hunt, not the open approach of lawmen on legitimate business. Is there another way out of here? She asked. Decision made. Thomas nodded toward the back. Through the root cellar. Comes out in a ravine about 50 yards behind the cabin. Get your papers, Sam ordered, holstering her weapon. We're leaving. Now. Thomas gathered the documents with haste, stuffing them into a leather satchel as Sam retrieved her own gear. The riders were less than a quarter-mile away, now. Dust rising behind their horses. What about Benjamin? Thomas asked as they headed for the trapdoor hidden beneath a rag rug. If they find him, one problem at a time. Sam cut him off, lighting a lantern from the cooking fire. Move. The cellar was little more than a cramped storage space with a rough-hewn tunnel extending into darkness. They crouched beneath low-hanging beams, the lantern casting eerie shadows as they made their way through the damp passage. Behind them, they heard the muffled sounds of the riders reaching the cabin. Benjamin showed me this escape route when I arrived. Thomas explained as they hurried. Said he built it during the Apache Wars. Never thought I'd need it. The tunnel gradually sloped upward, ending at a trapdoor concealed beneath brush. Sam extinguished the lantern before pushing it open cautiously, scanning for any sign of the men. The ravine stretched empty before them, shadowed by the late afternoon sun. My horse is hidden about half a mile northeast, Sam whispered. Can you move quietly? Thomas nodded, and they set off, keeping low and sticking to the rocky ground where they'd leave minimal track. The sounds of men searching the cabin faded behind them, replaced by the whisper of wind through stone arches. When they reached Sam's mare, Thomas paused, looking back toward the cabin with concern. Benjamin will return soon. If those men are still there, your friend will have to fend for himself, Sam said, checking her saddlebag. I can't risk both our necks for an old prospector. He saved my life, Thomas insisted. Took me in when everyone else believed Henry's lies. I can't just abandon him. Sam's patience then. Listen carefully, Whittaker. I haven't decided if I believe your story yet, but those men back there weren't moving like lawmen, and that makes me cautious. Right now, my job is to get you back to Eagle Pass alive so the truth, whatever it is, can come out. Thomas held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. You're right. Benjamin's smarter than he looks. He'll recognize trouble and stay clear. Oh, good. Now mount up. Sam swung into the saddle, then extended a hand down to Thomas. We've got a long ride ahead, and those men won't give up easily. Thomas hesitated only briefly before accepting her help, settling behind her on the mare's back. You're taking quite a risk, Miss Blackwell, believing a wanted man over your... I haven't decided what I believe, Sam replied, urging the horse forward. But I know danger when I see it, and I don't leave anyone to face 3 armed men without a fair chance, guilty or not. That they rode north initially, away from their pursuers, and the most direct route back to Eagle Pass. Sam pushed the mare as hard as she dared with the double burden, following game trails deeper into canyon country. When dusk fell, they made a cold camp in the shelter of a sandstone arch. No fire to betray their position. We'll circle back toward Eagle Pass tomorrow, Sam explained, sharing jerky and hardtack from her provisions. Taking the long way around. Those men will expect us to head straight there, or make for the territorial border. Thomas accepted the meager meal with murmured thanks. You've done this before, evading pursuit. Part of the job. Sam kept her voice neutral. Sometimes the hunters become the hunted. They ate in silence as stars emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear desert sky. Despite her professional detachment, Sam found herself studying Thomas in the moonlight. There was an integrity in his manner that didn't match the description of a desperate thief. Then again, she'd been fooled before. Tell me about these documents, she said finally. How did you discover what your brother was doing? Thomas pulled the satchel closer, extracting several folded papers. I've worked at the bank since returning from school back east. Never as prominent as he's always been the face of Whittaker banking, but I know the operations. 3 months ago, I noticed discrepancies in the ledgers. Small at first, then larger. Money shifting between accounts, without proper documentation. He spread the papers on the ground between them. Sam examined the papers in the moonlight, recognizing bank letterhead and official-looking stamps. She couldn't verify their authenticity, but the level of detail was impressive for a fabrication. If this is true, why would Henry steal from his own bank? He's already wealthy, isn't he? Thomas's mouth twisted in a grim smile. My brother has expensive tastes and poor judgment. Gambling, mainly. High-stakes poker with Delaney and others. He lost heavily this past year, more than he could cover from his legitimate income. And you confronted him about this 3 days before the robbery. I thought, foolishly, that he would confess, make restitution. That family loyalty would matter more than money. Thomas stared into the darkness. Instead, he asked for time to consider his option. The next night, the bank was robbed, and 3 witnesses swore they saw me fleeing the scene. But you weren't there, Sam said, neither question nor statement. I was miles away, at the Preston Ranch. Old man Preston was dying and had asked me to help organize his affairs. Thomas ran a hand through his hair in frustration. But he passed before dawn, with only his housekeeper. Not exactly an ironclad alibi. Sam considered this new information, weighing it against her instincts and experience. If we make it to Eagle Pass, what's your plan? These papers alone won't outweigh witness testimony. The circuit judge arrives in 1 week. Before then, I need to get to the bank's directors. 2 of them, James Harrington and Victor Mueller, have known me since childhood. If I can convince them to examine the accounts personally to verify what these documents show, Thomas gestured at the papers, Henry's scheme will collapse. And if they don't believe you, if Henry has them in his pocket too, Thomas's expression hardened. Then I'll take my chances with the judge, but I won't run from a crime I didn't commit. Assam repacked her saddlebags, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with his plan. Get some rest. We ride at first light. She settled with her back against stone, one Colt across her lap. And Whittaker, don't mistake pragmatism for trust. Try to run, and I'll track you down before sundown. Thomas nodded, accepting her warning without protest. Fair enough, Miss Black. Sam, she corrected, surprising herself. If we're going to dodge bullets together, you might as well use my name. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sam, then. And thank you. A dawn came too soon, painting the canyon walls with gold and rose. They set out as the first rays breached the horizon, Sam's charting a circuitous route that would eventually lead them back to Eagle Pass. The territory was harsh but beautiful. Towering mesas, hidden valleys, ancient stone arches standing sentinel against the sky. By midday, they'd seen no sign of pursuit, but Sam remained vigilant. Men like Wilson and Harris wouldn't give up easily, especially if Thomas's accusations were true. If Henry Whittaker was indeed embezzling from his own bank, the stakes were higher than a simple robbery case. They paused to rest the horse. In the shade of a cottonwood grove beside a small spring, a rare oasis in the desert landscape. As Thomas filled their canteens, Sam climbed a nearby rise to scan their back trail. The glint of sun on metal caught her eye immediately. 3 riders following their path, maybe 2 hours behind. She cursed softly. Their pursuers were more skilled than she'd given them credit for. We've got company, she announced, sliding down the slope to where Thomas waited. They've picked up our trail somehow. Oh, what now? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Sam considered their options. We're still a full day's ride from Eagle Pass, and that's pushing hard. We need to lose them or confront them. And I don't like our odds in a straight fight, 2 against 3, with 1 gun between us. Thomas gestured toward a rugged escarpment to the east. There's an old Apache stronghold in those cliffs, a maze of caves and narrow passages. I explored them as a boy. If we can reach it before they catch up, we could lose them in the labyrinth, Sam finished decision. Let's ride. They pushed the mare harder now, climbing steadily toward the distant cliffs. The terrain grew increasingly difficult. Loose shale, steep inclines, narrow passages between towering stone. By late afternoon, they reached the base of the escarpment. We'll have to continue on foot, Sam said, dismounting. The mare can't manage those switchbacks. She removed her saddlebags and essential gear, then slapped the horse's flank, sending it trotting toward a grassy depression where it could find water and forage. Thomas led the way up a nearly invisible trail that wound between massive boulders, climbing steadily toward the weathered cliffs above. The sun was low on the horizon. By the time they reached the first of the caves, a yawning mouth in the red stone, its depths disappearing into darkness. From their elevated position, they could see the 3 riders in the distance, still following their trail with dogged determination. They're persistent, I'll give them that, Sam muttered, checking her ammunition. How well do you remember these caves? Well enough, Thomas replied. There's a network of chambers and passages, some large enough to stand in, others mere crawl spaces. They connect throughout the escarpment, with multiple exits on different levels. Assam nodded. Then let's make ourselves scarce. Lead on. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately, a welcome relief from the desert heat. Thomas guided them through the main chamber and into a narrower passage, their way lit only by the fading daylight from the entrance. When that light dwindled to nothing, Sam produced a small tin lantern from her pack, its dim glow barely illuminating the path ahead. We should find a defensible position, she said as they navigated the winding corridor. Somewhere with a clear view of any approach, but with cover for us. Thomas led her deeper into the maze, through chambers where ancient handprints still stained the wall, past stone formations shaped by millennia of patient water. Finally, they emerged onto a small ledge overlooking a larger cavern below. This was a lookout point, he explained. From here, we can see anyone entering through the main passage, but we're shielded from view, and there's a back way out if needed. He pointed to a narrow fissure behind them. Sam approved with a curt nod. We'll wait here, see if they're foolish enough to follow us into this labyrinth. They settled into position, extinguishing the lantern to leave only darkness. Outside night had fallen completely. The desert silent, except for the occasional cry of a hunting owl. Time stretched, measured only by steady breathing, and the slow shift of stars visible through a high crevice in the stone. "Why bounty hunting?" Thomas asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper in the darkness. Sam remained silent, so long he might have thought she hadn't heard. Finally, she answered, "It's what I'm good at, tracking, reading people, knowing when someone's running from justice or toward their own version of it. Most women don't choose a life of chasing desperate men across terror. Most women don't have much choice at all." Sam replied, an edge to her voice. Then softer, "My husband was a marshal in Arizona Territory, killed by a fugitive he was transporting. I tracked the man down when the law couldn't or wouldn't. Found I had a talent for it. I'm sorry about your husband. It was a long time ago." Sam shifted position, adjusting her grip on the Colt. "What about you? Banking doesn't seem to suit you." Thomas chuckled softly. "It doesn't. I wanted to raise horses, actually. Had plans for a breeding operation north of Eagle Pass. Good Spanish stock crossed with Eastern thoroughbreds. Henry thought it impractical, insisted I join the family business instead. And you gave up your dream to please your brother. I thought I was being responsible. Turns out, I was just being a fool." A sound from below silenced their conversation. The scrape of boot on stone, barely audible but unmistakable. Sam tensed, raising her weapon toward the main passage. Thomas pressed himself against the wall beside her, scarcely breathing. A faint glow appeared in the tunnel, lantern light carefully shielded. One man emerged slowly into the larger chamber, then another. Wilson and Harris, Sam presumed. Recognizing the bank guards from Thomas's description, they moved cautiously, guns drawn, searching the shadows. "They must be in here somewhere," Wilson muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the cavern. Tracks led straight to the entrance. "I don't like this, Pete," Harris replied nervously. "Place feels like a tomb. Stop being superstitious. Whittaker's no ghost. Just a thief who knows too much." Wilson raised his lantern higher, the light rippling across stone formations. "Delaney's watching the main exit. They're trapped in here? Same as us." Sam calculated angles and distances in the near darkness. 3 shots, at most, before the men pinpointed their position. Not good odds in an environment where sound carried so efficiently. Beside her, Thomas reached slowly into his satchel, withdrawing something small. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Creating a distraction," he whispered, barely audible. "Be ready." But before she could respond, he tossed the object. A stone, she realized, far across the cavern. It clattered against the opposite wall, the sound amplified in the enclosed space. Wilson and Harris whirled toward the noise, firing instinctively into the darkness. "Move!" Thomas grabbed Sam's arm, pulling her toward the fissure behind them. They squeezed through the narrow opening as gunshots and shouts echoed through the cave system. The passage was tight, barely wide enough for their shoulders, and completely dark. They moved by touch alone, feeling their way along rough stone, guided by Thomas's memory of childhood explorations. After what seemed an eternity of claustrophobic darkness, the passage widened, then opened onto a small ledge high. Stars blazed overhead, and the desert stretched below, silver in the moonlight. A steep trail zigzagged down the cliff face, barely visible in the darkness. "This leads to the southern side," Thomas explained breathlessly. "If we can reach the bottom before they figure out where we've gone." The crack of a rifle interrupted him, the bullet striking stone inches from Sam's head. She pulled Thomas down behind a boulder as a second shot rang out. "Delaney," Thomas whispered. "He must have circled around while the others drove us through the caves." Sam peered carefully around their cover. In the moonlight, she could make out a figure on a lower ledge, rifle raised, watching their position. They were pinned down, with Wilson and Harris potentially behind them, and a steep, exposed climb ahead. "Options?" she asked tersely. Thomas surveyed their precarious position. "There's another route, more dangerous but less exposed. A series of handholds cut into the cliff face. It leads to a narrow canyon below, out of Delaney's line of sight." "Show me," Sam ordered. They crawled along the ledge, keeping low as another shot rang out, this one wide of their position. At the far end, Thomas pointed to what looked like a sheer drop. Only when Sam peered closer could she make out the shallow handholds carved into the stone, ancient steps for smaller hands and feet than theirs. Sam holstered her Colt and swung carefully over the ledge, finding the first handhold with her boot. The ancient steps were worn smooth by time and weather, some barely wide enough for fingertips. She descended slowly, testing each hold before committing her weight. Above her, Thomas followed, his breathing controlled but audible in the night stillness. A shout echoed from the caves. Wilson or Harris had discovered their escape route. Moments later, rifle fire erupted, bullets whining off stone as Delaney spotted their moving forms against the cliff face. Sam pressed herself against the rock, seeking whatever minimal cover the uneven surface provided. "Keep moving," Thomas urged from above. "We're almost out of his line of sight." Sam continued her descent, fingers aching, boots scraping for purchase on the treacherous surface. A bullet struck so close to her left hand. She felt stone fragments sting her cheek. She resisted the instinct to hurry, knowing that haste would be fatal on the path. 20 feet from the bottom, her right foot slipped, dislodging a shower of pebbles into the darkness below. For one heart-stopping moment, she hung by her hands alone, legs swinging over empty space. Above her, Thomas froze. "Sam," he hissed. "I'm all right," she grunted, finding a new foothold and continuing her descent. "Keep moving." They reached the canyon floor as Delaney's shots became more sporadic, the angle too extreme for accurate fire. Without pausing to rest, Sam and Thomas ran along the narrow ravine, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. The canyon twisted and turned, eventually opening onto a broad wash lined with stunted cottonwoods. Here they paused, lungs burning, to assess their situation. "We lost the horses," Sam said between breaths, "and most of my gear. But we're alive," Thomas pointed out, "and they'll have to backtrack to pick up our trail again. That buys us time." Sam oriented herself by the stars. Eagle Pass is still at least 15 miles east. Without horses, that's a full day's walk across open country. There's a line shack about 5 miles south of here, Thomas offered. Used by ranchers during roundup. Might have supplies, maybe even horses if we're lucky. Sam nodded. "Lead the way." They traveled through the night, following game trails when possible, always moving eastward. The desert was alive with sounds, coyotes calling, owls swooping silently overhead, the rustle of small creatures in the brush. Dawn found them approaching a weathered structure, nestled in a shallow arroyo. The line shack was little more than a single room with a lean-to for horses, its rough timbers bleached gray by sun and wind. No smoke rose from the chimney, and the small corral stood empty. "Doesn't look like anyone's home," Sam observed, drawing her Colt as they approached cautiously. The interior was musty but undisturbed. A narrow bunk against one wall, a crude table and stool, a cold fireplace with cooking implements hanging nearby. Shelves held basic provisions, beans, coffee, hardtack, left for any traveler in need. "No horses," Thomas confirmed after checking the lean-to. "But enough food to keep us going." Sam secured the door and moved to the single window, checking their back trail. No sign of pursuit yet, but she held no illusions about their safety. Wilson, Harris, and Delaney would be following, driven by whatever secrets they feared Thomas might reveal. "We should rest while we can," she decided. 2 hours, then we move on. Thomas nodded agreement, sinking onto the stool with visible exhaustion. In the growing light, Sam could see the toll of their flight, his clothes torn, face scratched from the narrow cave passage, eyes hollow with fatigue. "You could still turn me in," he said quietly. "Collect your bounty. Avoid making enemies of Henry and his men." Sam checked her remaining ammunition, avoiding his gaze. "I was hired to bring you to justice, not to a firing squad in the desert. Is that the only reason? Professional integrity?" She looked up then, meeting his steady gaze. "I don't know what I believe yet, Whittaker, but I've seen enough to know there's more to this story than your brother told me. And I don't leave puzzles unsolved." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's something, at least." Sam turned back to the window, uncomfortable with the moment of connection. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch." They departed the line shack mid-morning, carrying what supplies they could manage for the final push to Eagle Pass. They grew brutally hot, the sun beating down without mercy as they crossed open country. They moved from shade to shade when possible, conserving water and strength. By late afternoon, The distant smudge of Eagle Pass appeared on the horizon, a mirage-like promise of civilization. Sam called a halt in the shadow of a mesa, studying the town through narrowed eyes. "We can't just walk in the front door," she said. "Your brother's men will be watching the approaches." Thomas nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's a back way, through the old silver mine that runs beneath the eastern edge of town. The entrance is about a mile from here." "More caves?" Sam asked dryly. "Afraid so. But these are man-made at least, shored up with timber. The mine entrance was half hidden by brush and fallen rock. Its timbers weathered, but still solid." "Cool." Stale air greeted them as they ducked inside, lighting a small torch Thomas had fashioned from line shack supplies. "The main shaft runs straight for about a quarter mile," he explained as they moved forward, "then branches toward town. The northern tunnel comes up behind the livery stable." "You seem to know these tunnels well," Sam observed. Thomas chuckled softly. "Misspent youth. My friends and I used them for all sorts of adventures. Scared my mother half to death when she found out." The passage narrowed as they progressed, the air growing thicker with dust in the memory of long-ceased mining operation. Timber supports creaked occasionally overhead, a reminder of the tons of earth suspended above them. "So what's the plan when we reach town?" Sam asked. "Assuming we make it that far. Find James Harrington first," Thomas replied. "He's the most senior of the bank directors, and the least likely to be in Henry's pocket. If I can show him these documents, convince him to examine the accounts himself, and if that fails, then we go to Sheriff Hayes. He already suspects something's not right. With your testimony about Wilson and Harris trying to kill us, he might be persuaded to hold Henry for questioning until the circuit judge arrives." Sam's boot struck something in the darkness, a rotted timber, its core eaten away by time and burrowing insects. She stepped carefully over it. "And where do I fit into all this? My contract was to bring you in, not start a crusade against the most powerful man in Eagle Pass." Thomas paused, turning to face her torchlight. "I'm not asking you to fight my battles, Sam. Once we reach town, you can walk away. Say I overpowered you, escaped. Whatever preserves your reputation." The offer hung between them in the dusty air, generous but somehow unsatisfying. Before Sam could respond, a sound echoed from somewhere ahead, the unmistakable scrape of boot on stone. She extinguished their torch with a swift movement, plunging them into absolute darkness. "Someone's in the tunnel," she whispered, drawing her Colt. They stood frozen, barely breathing, as the sound came again, closer now, accompanied by the faint glow of approaching lamplight. Sam felt Thomas tense beside her, preparing for another confrontation. "Thomas, that you, boy?" The voice that called out was aged, uncertain, but with a core of steel beneath the quaver. "Benjamin," Thomas replied, relief evident in his tone. "Benjamin Holt." The light grew stronger as the old prospector rounded a bend in the tunnel, his weathered face breaking into a gap-toothed smile at the sight of them. "Knew you'd head for these tunnels. Been waiting here since yesterday." "How did you know?" Thomas asked, moving forward to clasp the old man's hand. "Those men came looking for you at my cabin. Tore the place apart, but I was watching from the hills. Figured you'd make for Eagle Pass. And this is the only way in that ain't watched." Benjamin nodded towards Sam. "This the bounty hunter they sent after you?" This is Samantha Blackwell," Thomas confirmed. "She could have turned me in. Chose to help instead." Benjamin's shrewd eyes assessed Sam. "Then she's smarter than she looks. Town's buzzing with news, Thomas. Your brother's been moving money out of the bank, preparing to leave, folks think. He's running," Sam realized. "Cutting his losses before the circuit judge arrives. We need to move," Thomas said urgently. "Tonight, if Henry leaves town with those funds, there won't be anything left to prove your innocence," Sam finished grimly. "Lead on, old man. We've got a banker to catch."